the desert girl who tamed the millionaire Pharaoh. Before we begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that will remind you that real love is not about money or power. And if you believe kindness can still change a cold heart, drop A in the comments right now. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let us return to our main character. The sun was sinking low over the Egyptian desert, turning every grain of sand into molten gold. The wind moved gently, whispering across the dunes as if the earth itself was breathing. Somewhere in that vast emptiness, a woman kept walking. Layla Karim adjusted her scarf against the heat still clinging to her skin. Her steps were steady, but her body ached. Behind her, a small group of tourists laughed inside a dusty jeep. Their trip was over. Hers was not. She still had another 2 hours of cleanup, another 2 hours of pretending she was fine. She reached for her canteen and tipped it. Only a few drops touched her tongue. She sighed and looked toward the horizon, where Cairo's skyline shimmered faintly in the distance. Somewhere there, her father lay in a hospital bed, waiting for medicine she could no longer afford. Inside her pocket, the letter from the bank crinkled against her palm, a reminder that their home would soon be gone. The wind picked up, brushing sand against her legs. Layla whispered to herself, "Just one miracle, please." That was when she heard it. At first, it sounded like thunder, but it grew louder closer. She turned and saw 3 black SUVs slicing through the dunes, engines growling like something alive. Her heart skipped a beat. No one came out here at this hour. The first car stopped just a few feet away. The door opened, and a man stepped out. He looked out of place, dressed in a dark gray suit that somehow remained untouched by the sand. His posture was precise, his expression unreadable. He removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes the color of burnished bronze. They locked on her, assessing, calculating. "Are you Layla Karim?" His voice was deep, controlled, the kind of voice that could command a room without trying. "Yes," she said quietly. "Who are you?" He handed her an envelope sealed with gold. "My name is Adrian Malik. I am the CEO of Pharaoh Group." Her breath caught. Everyone in Cairo knew that name, the man who built empires, the one they called the Pharaoh of modern Egypt. He was wealth and mystery wrapped in one. "I need a wife," he said. Layla blinked. "I am sorry? For 72 hours, he continued. "A legal arrangement. Appearances only. You will attend a ceremony beside me. You will be paid $200,000. She froze, the desert spinning around her. "Why me?" He studied her face for a long moment. "Because you are not part of my world. You are real. That is all that matters." Layla glanced down at the envelope in her trembling hands. The heat pressed against her skin, but the paper felt cold. $200,000. Enough to pay every debt, to save her father's life, to start over. Her voice broke the silence. "What happens when the 72 hours are over?" Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "You walk away. No questions. No strings." The wind howled again, whipping her scarf into the air. For a second, the desert felt alive, watching. Maybe this was what fate looked like, raw, unpredictable, and impossible to refuse. Layla looked up at him. "When do we start?" Adrian met her eyes. "Now. Please, stay with this story until the end, because what begins as a contract written in sand will soon become a promise written in the heart. Now let us return to our main character." The drive back to the city felt endless. The sun had already disappeared behind the dunes, leaving a burnt orange haze stretching across the horizon. Layla sat in the back seat of the SUV, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The air conditioning hummed softly, too cold against her sunburned skin. Outside, the desert rolled by in silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Across from her sat Adrian Malik, unreadable behind his dark gaze. He was scrolling through files on a sleek tablet, his posture straight, his expression carved from stone. He did not look at her once. Layla's throat was dry. "Why do you need a wife for 72 hours? Adrian did not answer immediately. The tablet screen reflected in his eyes as he spoke. "My father's final will states that I must be married by the time the board announces the new project. If I am not, control of Pharaoh Group transfers to the next shareholder." Layla frowned. "So this is about inheritance?" "This is about control," he said calmly. "I built that company from the dust. I will not watch it fall into the wrong hands." His tone was firm, but beneath it she sensed something else, fear, perhaps, or pride disguised as purpose. She looked at the ring box sitting on the seat between them, still unopened. They arrived at his private estate near the edge of Cairo just after sunset. The mansion rose from the sand like a mirage, white stone walls, tall arches, and golden lights glowing through glass. The guards opened the iron gates without a word. Inside, the marble floor reflected the chandelier above. Servants moved quietly, heads bowed. Everything smelled of polished wood and jasmine. Layla hesitated near the entrance, her sandals dusty against the flawless floor. Adrian turned to her. "Follow me." "Come on." He led her down a long corridor into a study filled with books and old maps. On the desk lay the marriage documents, neatly stacked. He handed her a pen. "You can still walk away. Once you sign, there is no turning back." Layla took a slow breath. "You said this is only for 72 hours?" "Yes," he replied. "After the gala, we will file for annulment. You will be free and fully paid." Her heart pounded as she took the pen. The paper trembled slightly beneath her hand. She thought of her father, of the notice from the bank, of the nights she had counted coins at the bedside table. With a single stroke, she signed her name. Adrian signed next. When it was done, he opened the box and slid a gold ring toward her. The surface shimmered with the engraved image of Anubis, the god of truth and protection. "This will make the story believable," he said. "Wear it when we appear together." The ring was heavier than she expected. She slipped it onto her finger, and for a brief moment, the weight of it made her feel small and powerful at once. He watched her silently, then turned to the window. "Dinner is at 7. A stylist will arrive in the morning to prepare you for the announcement event." Layla's voice was soft. "You are used to giving orders." He looked over his shoulder, a faint smirk touching his lips. "And you are not used to following them." For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. "Maybe we will both learn something." He said nothing. The silence between them was not hostile, just full like a storm waiting at the edge of the horizon. Later that night, Layla lay awake in the guest room. The ceiling above her glittered faintly with the reflection of the pool outside. Everything around her was beautiful, but it felt borrowed, fragile. She traced the ring on her finger and whispered, 72 hours. Ardo. Down the hall, Adrian stood on the balcony, staring into the dark stretch of desert beyond his estate. In his hand, he held a worn letter addressed in his late father's handwriting. The seal was broken long ago, but he still read the words in his mind. "Do not lose yourself chasing what you think is power." He folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into his pocket. Two strangers now bound by a contract neither fully understood. "Please, stay with this story until the end, because in 72 hours, everything they believed about love, pride, and power will change forever." Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting golden patterns across the marble floor. Layla woke to the quiet hum of the city below, far from the dry emptiness of the desert. For a moment, she forgot where she was until her eyes found the gold ring glinting on her hand. Reality settled like dust after a storm. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. When she opened it, a woman stood waiting, elegant and professional, holding a garment bag. "Good morning, Miss Karim. Mr. Malik asked me to help you prepare for today's event." Layla nodded, stepping aside. The woman introduced herself as Mira, head of corporate communications. She moved with quick precision, her words sharp and efficient. "The gala begins at 7 this evening. You will be introduced as Mrs. Layla Malik, wife of the CEO. Every camera in the city will be there. You must look the part." The words carried a faint edge of warning. Mira's smile did not reach her eyes. Inside the bag was a gown the color of desert sand, threaded with silver. Layla ran her fingers along the fabric, feeling its softness. She had never worn anything so expensive in her life. Hours later, she stood before the mirror as stylists pinned her hair and brushed shimmer across her skin. She barely recognized the reflection staring back, a woman who looked composed, confident, almost royal. Yet behind her calm eyes, her heart raced. Downstairs, Adrian was waiting. He stood in a dark tailored suit, a perfect contrast to her light gown. When he turned and saw her, something unspoken flickered in his gaze, surprise. Maybe admiration, but it vanished just as quickly. "You look appropriate," he said. Layla raised an eyebrow. "Appropriate?" He gave a faint smile. That was a compliment. The limousine ride to the gala was silent except for the hum of the engine. Outside, Cairo glowed beneath the setting sun, the city alive with traffic and sound. Layla watched the lights blur past her window. "Do you ever get tired of pretending?" she asked. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. "In my world, appearance is survival." They arrived at the Royal Meridian Hotel, where photographers waited behind velvet ropes. Flashbulbs exploded the moment the car door opened. Adrian stepped out first, offering his hand. She hesitated, then took it. The crowd erupted in a storm of clicking shutters and shouted questions. "Mr. Malik, is this your new wife? Who is she? Is this the reason for your sudden return to Cairo?" Adrian's grip on her hand was steady. "Smile," he murmured. Layla turned to face the cameras. For a moment, the noise faded, replaced by a strange calm. She smiled, not the rehearsed smile she had practiced in front of the mirror, but a quiet, natural one. The flashes caught it, froze it, immortalized it. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers sparkled like constellations. Wealth filled every corner. Investors, politicians, heirs to empires. Layla felt the weight of every gaze on her. She could almost hear their whispers. Who is she? Where did she come from? Mira appeared again, standing too close to Adrian. Her hand brushed his arm as she whispered something that made him laugh lightly. Layla turned away, trying to ignore the sting that crept into her chest. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Adrian Malik and his wife, Mrs. Layla Malik." Applause rippled through the room. Adrian nodded politely. Layla took a breath, her palms damp. When a reporter called out, "Why marry someone so suddenly, Mr. Malik?" Adrian hesitated. Layla spoke before he could answer. "The desert teaches patience," she said, her voice calm. "And it teaches truth. Gold does not fear the wind. It shines brighter because of it." The room went silent for a heartbeat, then applause swelled. Cameras flashed again, but this time Adrian was not looking at them. He was watching her. Later that night, as the guests danced and champagne glasses clinked, Adrian leaned toward her. "You handled them well," he said. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "You did not think I could?" He smiled faintly. "I underestimated you." Layla turned back toward the ballroom, her pulse steady but her thoughts racing. For the first time since signing that contract, she felt something shift between them, something that was no longer part of the deal. "Please, stay with this story until the end, because what begins as an act will soon test every truth they both believe about power, pride, and love." The following morning, Cairo woke under a pale sky. The city hummed with distant noise, but inside Adrian Malik's mansion, everything was quiet. Layla sat by the window of her guest room, watching the sunlight move across the marble floor. Her gown from last night hung carefully on the chair, still carrying the faint scent of perfume and champagne. The gala had ended in triumph. Investors applauded, reporters wrote glowing headlines, and for one evening she had played the role of a millionaire's wife perfectly. Yet now, alone with her thoughts, the silence pressed heavier than applause ever could. A soft knock came at the door. It was Adrian. He stood in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a rare hint of calm in his usually guarded expression. "Good morning," he said. "I wanted to thank you for last night. You handled the press better than I expected." Layla turned, smiling faintly. "You mean I survived your world without embarrassing you?" He allowed a small smile. "Something like that." He stepped closer, handing her a folder. "This contains your schedule for the next 2 days. There will be a charity event tomorrow evening and a photo session at the construction site of our newest project this afternoon. The media will be watching. Keep wearing the ring." She looked down at her hand. The gold band with the Anubis engraving caught the light. "It feels heavier today," she murmured. "Good," Adrian said quietly. "It should remind you of what it costs to play this game." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "I will drive you myself." The car ride through the city was quieter than usual. Layla watched children chase kites between alleyways, women haggling over fruit in the market, and men carrying baskets through the narrow streets. It all looked so far away from his world of glass towers and boardrooms. When they arrived at the construction site, photographers were already waiting. Workers paused to stare at the convoy. Adrian stepped out first, shaking hands with his partners, his voice controlled and confident. Layla followed, her heels sinking slightly into the dust. She smiled politely as cameras clicked. One reporter called out, "Mrs. Malik, what do you think of your husband's vision for this city?" Layla hesitated, then answered honestly, "I think dreams are beautiful, but only if they do not forget the people who build them." "Two?" There was a ripple of surprise, followed by scattered applause from the workers. Adrian turned toward her, expression unreadable. When the cameras finally turned away, he leaned closer. "You have a habit of saying exactly what you think. Would you prefer I say nothing?" she asked. "No," he said after a pause. "It is refreshing." That evening they dined alone on the terrace. The air was cooler, and the sound of the city below mixed with the soft rush of the fountain nearby. Adrian poured her a glass of wine, the gesture careful, deliberate. "You have lived your whole life in the desert," he said. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Layla shook her head. "The desert does not hold you, it tests you. It teaches you who you are when everything else is gone." He studied her face, his usual distance softening for a moment. "I used to think money could protect me from that kind of emptiness," he said, "but it only builds walls." Layla looked out over the city lights. "Maybe you built those walls to hide something worth protecting." He did not answer. Instead, he looked down at his hands, the faint glint of his own ring catching the light. For a moment neither spoke. The air between them felt charged, not with tension, but with recognition, two people from different worlds standing on the same fragile ground. A servant approached quietly, setting a folded newspaper beside Adrian's plate. The headline read, "Pharaoh Group CEO and mysterious wife steal the spotlight." Layla stared at the photo of them holding hands. It looked real, frighteningly real. "They believe it," she said softly. Adrian met her gaze. "That is the point." But even as he spoke, something in his voice betrayed him, something that sounded almost like doubt. "Please, stay with this story until the end, because soon, this act of pretense will cross the line between arrangement and emotion, and neither of them will see it coming." The next evening arrived with a chill that drifted through the open terrace. The city below glittered like scattered jewels. But inside Adrian Malik's mansion, the atmosphere felt different, quieter, charged with something unspoken. Layla stood near the mirror, fastening the clasp of a delicate necklace that matched her gold gown. It was the second event of their 72-hour arrangement, a charity dinner hosted by Pharaoh Group. The purpose was simple: to display unity, charm investors, and remind everyone that Adrian Malik was a man in complete control of his life and empire. But as Layla looked at her reflection, she felt the weight of something deeper. Every movement, every smile, every word now mattered. Adrian appeared at the doorway, dressed in a black suit and tie, the image of confidence, yet his eyes paused on her longer than before. "You look right for the evening," he said, his voice even. Layla smiled faintly. "That almost sounds like a compliment." He did not reply, but the small curve at the corner of his mouth said enough. They arrived at the Royal Foundation Hall just after 7. Cameras flashed as soon as they stepped out of the limousine. Layla took a slow breath, reminding herself of every rule she had memorized. Smile, nod, stay close, never contradict him in public. Inside, chandeliers glowed like falling stars. Waiters moved with practiced grace, and the sound of violins filled the air. It was a world of glittering masks and polite laughter, a world that had never been hers. Adrian guided her through the crowd, greeting investors, shaking hands, answering questions about their new marriage. She followed his lead, but every time she glanced up, she found Mira watching from across the room, her expression sharp and unreadable. At dinner, the master of ceremonies raised a glass to honor Pharaoh Group's contribution to rebuilding rural schools. Adrian stood to speak. His words were confident, eloquent, rehearsed. But when he mentioned "my wife," his tone softened. Layla felt it. The audience did too. When the applause ended, a guest at the next table leaned over with a polite smile. "Mrs. Malik, how does it feel to be married to the most powerful man in Cairo?" Layla hesitated, then said simply, "Power means nothing if it cannot protect what truly matters." A murmur swept through the table. Adrian looked at her, an unreadable light flickering in his eyes. Later, during the formal dance, Adrian offered his hand. "It is part of the act," he said quietly. Layla placed her hand in his. "I know." The orchestra began to play a slow, haunting melody. He led her across the floor, every step practiced yet strangely genuine. She felt the strength of his hand on her back, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Around them, people whispered, smiled, and took pictures. But for that brief moment, it felt as if the room had vanished. "Tell me something," she said softly. "If this were not a contract, would you still have asked me to dance?" He looked down at her. "I do not know," he said. "But I am dancing now." The music faded. They stepped apart, applause filling the air once more. As they returned to their table, Mira approached with a glass of champagne and a smile that did not reach her eyes. "You have adapted quickly, Mrs. Malik. Not many could play this role so convincingly." Layla met her gaze, calm and steady. "Maybe I am not playing." Mira's smile faltered for just a second before she turned away. That night, when they returned home, Layla paused at the door of her room. Adrian's voice stopped her. "You did well tonight." She turned. "So did you." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary. Then he nodded once and walked away. In the quiet that followed, Layla removed her ring and set it on the nightstand. The engraved figure of Anubis caught the moonlight, gleaming softly. She traced its edges and whispered, "You said 72 hours, Adrian. But I think something has already changed. Please, stay with this story until the end, because what begins as a performance is about to collide with the truth, and when that happens, no contract can protect their hearts." The next morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. The hum of staff, the sound of phones, even the distant movement of cars all felt muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Layla woke early, the memory of the charity dinner still vivid in her mind. She had smiled, spoken, danced, and pretended, but what unsettled her most was how real it had started to feel. She stepped onto the balcony, the morning air cool against her skin. Below, the garden stretched in perfect symmetry, fountains catching the sunlight. For a moment, she forgot the weight of her borrowed life. A voice broke her thoughts. "You are up early, Tway." Adrian stood at the doorway, still in his shirt from the night before, sleeves rolled carelessly, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. He handed her a cup of coffee. "I figured you might need this. It is stronger than the one you made yesterday." She smiled slightly. "You noticed." "I notice more than you think," he said. His tone carried no arrogance, only quiet truth. They stood in silence, watching the morning unfold. The city beyond the gates began to stir, faint sounds of traffic echoing through the air. Layla broke the silence first. "You said once that money builds walls. Do you ever wish you could tear them down?" Adrian's eyes followed the horizon. "Every day. But I do not know who I would be without them. Maybe someone freer," she said. He turned to her. "And what about you, Layla Karim? What would freedom look like for you?" She thought for a long moment. "A small tea shop by the oasis. My father sitting at the front, smiling. No fear of losing anything." "That sounds simple," he said. "It sounds peaceful," she corrected. He nodded once. Then his phone rang, breaking the fragile stillness. He looked at the screen, his expression tightening. "The board meeting moved up. I need to leave in an hour." "Will you be gone long?" she asked. "Until tonight," he replied. "You should rest. Tomorrow ends the contract." The words hit harder than she expected. Tomorrow the end of the arrangement, the end of pretending, the end of them. She nodded, forcing a small smile. "Of course." After he left, the house felt too large. Layla wandered through the quiet halls, her footsteps echoing against the marble. She stopped at the study, where the documents from their deal still lay neatly stacked. Beneath them, she found a photograph Adrian as a child, standing beside an older man whose eyes looked familiar. His father. There was a gentleness in that smile that the adult version of Adrian seemed to have buried. Hours passed before she realized how late it had become. The sky outside turned from gold to gray, and the first drops of rain began to fall. She sat by the window, watching the water trace down the glass, when she saw movement at the gate. A figure in a black coat approached Mira. Moments later, the door opened. Mira walked in without knocking, her voice smooth and cold. "I did not expect to find you alone." Layla stood. "Adrian is not here." "I know," Mira said. "That is why I came. I wanted to see the woman who thinks she can rewrite a man's story with a 3-day contract." Layla met her gaze steadily. This was never about rewriting anything. It was about helping him keep what was his. Mira's smile thinned. "You think he will remember you when this is over? You are a tool, Layla. When the lights fade, so will your place in his life." "Yek." Layla's voice stayed calm. "Then at least I will have been honest. Can you say the same?" For a moment, Mira's composure cracked, but she recovered quickly and left without another word. The echo of her heels faded into silence. Layla sank back into the chair, heart pounding but steady. Outside, the rain thickened, blurring the city lights. She traced the ring on her finger and whispered, 72 hours, Adrian. But somehow, it feels like something much longer has begun. Tamed. Please, stay with this story until the end, because tomorrow, when the final day of the contract arrives, the truth neither of them expected will finally come to light. By the time Adrian returned that evening, the sky had already darkened over Cairo. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and cool. His car pulled into the driveway in silence. From the balcony, Layla saw him step out, shoulders tense, his phone pressed to his ear. His words were clipped, controlled, each one carrying the weight of a man used to solving problems no one else could. Inside, she waited near the stairs, unsure whether to greet him or retreat to her room. When he finally entered, his expression was colder than she remembered. "The board meeting did not go as planned," he said, removing his jacket. "Someone leaked part of the project contract to the press. They are accusing me of fraud." Layla's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said slowly, "that Pharaoh Group could lose everything if I do not find the source by morning." He walked to the window, his reflection fractured by the glass. "They also received photos of our marriage certificate. The story has spread. Some believe this entire marriage was a business stunt." Her heart sank. Who would do that? Adrian's eyes turned toward her, sharp and filled with doubt. "That is what I intend to find out." There was something in his tone that made her chest tighten. "You think I had something to do with this?" she said quietly. He hesitated for just a second, long enough for the silence to speak louder than words. "You are the only new variable in my life," he said finally. Layla stepped back, the disbelief cutting through her voice. "After everything, that is what you believe?" "This is not about belief," he replied. "It is about proof. Until I have it, I cannot risk trusting anyone." "Como?" Her voice trembled but did not break. "You asked me to help you protect what was yours?" "I did, but I will not stand here and defend myself against your fear." Adrian turned away, jaw tight, the gold ring on his hand catching the dim light. "The car will take you to the guest villa tonight. It is better if you stay away until this settles." She wanted to speak, to fight, but no words came. The man who had once looked at her with quiet understanding now saw only danger. Without another sound, she removed the ring from her finger and set it on the table between them. The engraved figure of Anubis gleamed faintly under the chandelier. "For someone who builds towers of glass," she said softly, "you still live behind walls thicker than stone." Layla walked out before he could answer. The drive to the villa felt endless. Raindrops slid down the window as the city lights blurred past. She pressed her hand to her chest, where the ring had rested just hours ago. The silence inside the car was so complete it almost swallowed her thoughts. Back at the mansion, Adrian remained alone in the study. The newspaper headlines stared back at him: Pharaoh Group scandal, marriage or manipulation. He opened his laptop, scanning through the leaked documents, the signatures, the timestamps, the emails. And then he saw a trail that led not to Layla, but to Mira. A single file transferred from her account to an external drive. The time matched exactly with the first press leak. His breath caught, anger rising like heat. "Mira," he whispered. "She did this." He closed the laptop and ran a hand through his hair. The weight of guilt settled over him like sand after a storm. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, echoing across the desert. In the quiet villa miles away, Layla sat by the window, staring into the dark. Every part of her wanted to hate him for doubting her, but another part, the part that had seen his loneliness beneath the armor, could not. She whispered to herself, "Maybe the desert does not break us. It just shows us who we really are." Please, stay with this story until the end, because what begins as a misunderstanding will soon turn into the moment that defines them both forever. By dawn, Adrian had not slept. The city outside his window was still dark, its skyline dimly glowing under a pale fog. He sat at his desk, the files spread out before him like a map of his own mistakes. Every line of evidence pointed to the truth he had refused to see. Mira was the one who had betrayed him. And in blaming Layla, he had become exactly the kind of man his father had warned him not to be. He stood suddenly, pushing his chair back. There was no more time to waste. He picked up the gold ring that still rested on the table, the one Layla had left behind, and slipped it into his pocket. "It is time to fix what I broke," he murmured. An hour later, he was in the boardroom of Pharaoh Group. The air was heavy with tension. Mira stood near the projection screen, surrounded by board members who whispered behind their folders. She greeted him with a practiced smile. "You came early. I assume you have prepared your defense." Adrian placed a folder on the table. "I have prepared the truth." He tapped a button on his laptop. Instantly, the projector lit up, displaying a series of timestamps and digital records. The room fell silent. Each image, each file, each signature proved her connection to the leak. Mira's smile faltered. "You cannot prove intent." Adrian's voice stayed calm. "I do not need to. Your actions speak for you." He turned to the board. "This company was built on integrity. It will not be destroyed by greed." Away. Within minutes, security escorted Mira out of the room. The moment the door closed behind her, Adrian exhaled, the first breath that did not taste of guilt. But the relief did not last long. He knew where he needed to go next. Outside, the sun was rising over the desert. He drove alone, the city fading behind him as dunes stretched endlessly ahead. The road shimmered with heat even in the early light. Each mile carried the same thought through his mind: he had to find her. When he reached the villa, Layla was already awake. She stood by the balcony, hair tousled by the wind, a quiet strength in her stillness. When she turned and saw him, her eyes held a mixture of surprise and distance. "You should not be here," she said evenly. "I was wrong," Adrian said simply. "It was not you. It was Mira. She tried to destroy everything, and I let her convince me that you were part of it." Layla did not move. "So now you are here to clear your conscience?" He shook his head. "No, I am here to ask for forgiveness." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She looked away, her hands gripping the balcony rail. "You accused me of betrayal when all I did was believe in you." "I know," he said quietly, "and that is what hurts most." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. The sunlight caught the engraving of Anubis, the god of truth and protection. "You left this behind, but this time I am not asking you to wear it for a contract. I am asking you to wear it because I want it to mean something real." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the wind. Layla looked at the ring, then at him. The walls around her, heart built from pride, pain, and disbelief, wavered like heat over sand. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Because I finally learned what power really is," Adrian said. "It is not control. It is the courage to be honest, even when it costs everything." "Yukai." She stared at him, searching for the man she had once doubted could feel anything. What she found instead was truth-bare, unguarded, and human. Slowly, she extended her hand. "If I take it, there are no more walls between us." "There will not be," he said. She let him place the ring back on her finger. The metal was warm from his touch, heavy but comforting. "Please, stay with this story until the end, because what began as a contract of convenience is about to become a promise that neither of them expected, one that will change both of their lives forever." 1 year later, the desert bloomed again under a soft sunrise. The dunes glowed gold against the horizon, and the wind carried the scent of jasmine from the oasis nearby. The world seemed quieter, gentler, as if even time itself had paused to watch. At the heart of the oasis stood a small gathering. White fabric billowed between wooden arches, flowers woven through every thread. It was not a lavish ceremony. There were no cameras, no reporters, no investors. Only the sound of wind, the shimmer of sand, and 2 people standing side by side. Layla wore a simple ivory dress, light as the morning air. Her father sat in a wheelchair nearby, smiling softly, his health restored. Adrian stood across from her in a white linen suit, the sunlight warming his face. The gold ring gleamed between his fingers, the engraving of Anubis clear and bright. The officiant spoke gently. "You once signed a contract for 72 hours. Today, you make a promise without end." Layla met Adrian's eyes. "We began as a deal written in ink and sand," she said. "But every storm, every silence, every truth since then has made me believe that love is not a transaction. It is a choice, made again and again." Adrian smiled, his voice steady. "I built my life around walls and numbers. You taught me that the only thing worth building is trust. You were never part of my plan, Layla. You were the reason my plan changed." He slipped the ring onto her hand. This time, it did not feel like a weight of obligation. It felt like a promise finally kept. As they sealed their vows, a light breeze swept through the dunes. The white fabric lifted, and grains of sand sparkled like scattered gold. Layla laughed softly, and Adrian reached out, brushing a few strands of hair from her face. Her father clapped once, his voice trembling with pride. "You see, my daughter? Even the desert gives back to those who give with an honest heart." Adrian turned toward him, his tone sincere. "You raised a woman stronger than any empire I have ever built." Cunning. The guests applauded, not with noise but with warmth, their smiles lit by the morning sunday. For the first time in his life, Adrian felt free not because he owned anything, but because he had finally learned how to give without fear. As the ceremony ended, Layla looked at him, her eyes reflecting the sky. "Do you remember what I said that night at the gala?" He nodded. "That gold does not fear the wind." She smiled. "Because it shines brighter because of it." He took her hand and kissed it gently. "And you, my desert queen, are the proof of it." They walked together toward the edge of the dune where the desert opened wide before them. The horizon shimmered, endless and alive, and the footprints they left behind trailed in the shape of infinity. Please, stay with this story until the end, because in a world built on status and wealth, two hearts chose something far rarer: love without conditions, and truth that no storm could bury.